After beating Clair Obscur Expedition 33, this game quickly became one of my favorite video games of all time, and I strongly believe it might be Game of the Year for 2025 because I can't imagine a single game that can top it this year. And it's so good to the point where I spent 90 hours of my time getting all the achievements, and ultimately 100% in the game in order to experience everything it has to offer. But one of the many things that make Expedition 33 so special and interesting is learning about how the game was made and how their team was brought together. Expedition 33 was developed by a French studio named Sandfall Interactive, which is a team filled with only about 30 developers, mostly being junior developers, and the director is an ex-Ubisoft dev who left the company because funny enough he was feeling bored working at Ubisoft and he wanted to do something different. And the lead writer who originally auditioned to become a voice actor is a former private executive investor who was found on Reddit out of all places, and this is her first time writing for a video game. Not only that, but the composer was discovered after sharing his music from SoundCloud on an obscure video game forum, and this is his first time making music for a video game. And this is the studio's first game they've ever created, but they somehow came together to create one of the best and most impactful games that came out this year. And it's honestly kind of inspiring, but at the same time, how's that not crazy? But I'm so happy to see that Expedition 33 is receiving so much praise from the general gaming community, people within the gaming industry, and this game was so good and so groundbreaking that it got praised by the president of France. And I'm not even joking, look at this shit, like how is this not crazy? But after playing through Expedition 33, I just wanted to talk about my experience and why I feel like this game deserves to be Game of the Year. And for this video, I'll be keeping story spoilers to a minimum, but for gameplay, I'll be keeping a major focus on Act 1, but you may see some glimpses of gameplay from Act 2 or Act 3. And to tell you the truth, I think it will be very difficult to talk about the gameplay without showing some sort of spoilers, but I will try my best to avoid showing any super duper major spoilers, or at the very least I won't put a major focus on it, because out of respect I believe this game is best experienced when you know very little about what happens in the story. But yeah, I just wanted to give that little heads up before I start talking about the game. The story begins in the city of Lumiere, and for the past 67 years the people of Lumiere have been suffering from this annual event called the Gamage, where a being known as the Paintress would wake up and mysteriously paint a decreasing number on her monolith every year, and everyone who was the same age or above that number fades away and dies. And nobody really knows the reason why the Paintress is doing this, but after every single Gamage, they will send out expeditions to confront and slay the Paintress so these Gamages will stop happening. But when these expeditions are sent out, they are never heard from again. But for this story, we play as the members of Expedition 33 and we sail out with the same exact mission: to stop the Paintress once and for all and uncover the mysteries about why this is happening. The story starts off very strong with an emotional and impactful prologue that sets up the story perfectly, and it follows a heartbreaking journey that has heavy themes about hope, loss, family, and grief. It's filled with a lot of high stakes with many twists and turns and big reveals, while learning about the truth of this world alongside the characters. But I wouldn't say that this story is always depressing, because it keeps a good balance by finding ways to fit in funny situations as well. And honestly, I was surprised by the many times I caught myself genuinely laughing at the humor. I also loved learning about every single character because they have these very in-depth story arcs that feel so genuine and meaningful due to their amazing line delivery that is filled with so much passion. And I never really had an issue with the pacing of the story because I was always fascinated by the mysteries of this world and all of the compelling backstories, motivations, personalities, and different interactions between all of the characters. And visually, the game looks very beautiful with great artistic values within the art style, and you can really appreciate this while looking at the cutscenes or exploring the world. And there is so much thought and detail that goes into the environment because it can tell you a silent story through the intentional design of the scenery. And I would go as far to call these cutscenes cinematic masterpieces because they know how to control the atmospheric nature of a scene with well-directed camera work, lighting, and effects to set the mood of the story even when there's no dialogue involved. Even the characters have amazing body language to express their emotions without needing to say a single word. But there are some noticeable imperfections with the character models, such as the hair looking a little bit stiff, the lip syncing feeling slightly off, and the facial expressions can look a little bit weird with certain character models. But even with all of these imperfections, these were things I could easily overlook because every single character, including the enemies and bosses, have very cool, creative, and memorable character designs. And this is why I feel like this game desperately needs a photo mode, because there are so many beautiful areas and cool looking characters that people would love to take pictures of. And oh my god, from the first moment I opened this game, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The music was so good, I was stunned and I couldn't even leave the main menu. And while listening to the rest of the soundtrack while playing through the rest of the game, I don't think a single bad song was played, and this has to be one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. It does such a good job of guiding my emotions during key moments, especially when it comes to hyping me up for a crazy boss battle, and the music is so catchy that certain soundtracks are just stuck playing in a constant loop in my head, and I always find myself humming random songs even when I'm not playing the game. And the sound effects are always really good when it comes to conveying how a character feels, and it really knows how to set up the emotional tension of a scene perfectly. Even the combat sounds extremely defined to the point where you can feel the intense impact after every single move is taken. Also, you can really tell that the voice actors put their heart and soul into these characters, because the voice acting is filled with so much passion that makes the line delivery feel so genuine and real. And you can even hear the details from their stutters or from their voice shaking during certain lines. And as for gameplay, I decided to play on Expeditioner, which is essentially the normal mode, and you can easily change the difficulty at any point in the settings. But this is a really fun but kinda difficult reactive turn-based RPG that requires a lot of precision, with well-timed dodging, parrying, and quick time events, which are essentially the key mechanics that really held my attention during the combat. But before the combat even begins, you have the option to use a mechanic called First Strike, which essentially gives your party the advantage while fighting against enemies. And when you're in a battle, you can see the turns on the left side of your screen, so you can easily strategize based on who's going next. And at first, it was really hard to get used to dodging and parrying attacks, because it's not like you can keep spamming dodge and parry until things work, because honestly this game is not that forgiving. But it did a pretty good job with easing me into the gameplay, so with a lot of practice I started to get better at it. And even though normal mode, the combat could get kinda tricky with the way certain enemies and bosses try to fake you out or delay a move for like 10 years, but what specifically helped me was listening to sound cues or looking for visual indicators that gave me a hint on when I should dodge or parry. And this game is filled with unique enemies and bosses that never felt boring or repetitive to fight, since they all have unique attack patterns that you have to memorize to precisely dodge or parry. And boss fights can feel really intense because they have multiple phases that can change the way I would strategize for a fight. Dodging is a lot more forgiving than parrying, but I always felt like parrying is a little bit more beneficial since it gave me the opportunity to counterattack for extra damage, so I always prioritized parrying over dodging. And hitting a successful parry feels like the most satisfying thing ever, because some of these chin attacks can get a little bit crazy. But if you manage to avoid all of these attacks, you will be given bonus experience for not getting hit, which makes the combat feels extremely rewarding if you're really good at it. You can also gain AP, which gives you the opportunity to use skills by successfully using a base attack or parrying, and each character can use up to 6 skills, which usually cost a different amount of AP depending on how strong that skill is. And using these skills require you to do quick time events, but if you do them successfully, it will make your attack stronger, but if you do them incorrectly, your attack will be slightly weaker, or depending on the move, the attack can just blow up in your face. During battle, you also have access to tints, which are items that can either heal, restore AP, or revive a party member, which can be really helpful during tough situations. And after a tough battle, you can heal your whole entire party with something called chroma elixirs. There's also a shooting mechanic which costs 1 AP per shot, but you mostly want to use it to target enemy weak points, or specifically use it to shoot flying enemies, because otherwise they're usually hard to hit with melee attacks. But I really love this mechanic because it's adding some more variety when it comes to fighting different enemies. And as you're doing damage to an enemy, you gradually fill up their break meter, and once that meter is filled, you can use specific skills to break the enemy, which will leave them stunned and vulnerable for a short period of time. And sometimes you have to destroy shields that are protecting enemies from taking any damage, and the best way to deal with these shields are just by simply shooting them, or by using multi-hit skills to get rid of them. And status effects, buffs, and debuffs can be applied to both party members and enemies, which adds another layer of strategy. And both enemies and bosses have their own specific weaknesses, resistances, and immunities, depending on the elemental damage being used against them. But I really like that this game doesn't throw everything in your face all at once, because whenever you're progressing the story, it gradually introduces you to new mechanics that always keep the combat interesting. And while talking to one of my friends, they mentioned that this game needed some sort of encyclopedia or bestiary, and I 100% agree. It could have been a nice way to keep track of all of the enemy names, weaknesses, abilities, locations, and any other valuable information that can be used as a great resource to the player, but in general, it would have been nice to be able to look at all of the enemies side by side to truly appreciate all of their designs. And you can only use a maximum of 3 characters and fight 3 enemies at a time, but when your party gets wiped, you have the option to bring in the reserve team, which are basically the characters you have in the back of your party. Your outside party members receives only half the experience when they complete a battle, which is something I'm really happy about because I don't have to worry about doing any extra grinding, and they can still keep up with levels even though I'm not actively using them. But regardless, I still put in a lot of effort to use every single character. You can also equip characters with 3 different pictos, which are essentially modifiers that can boost their stats and give them passive abilities. And pictos can be converted into luminas, which are basically the same thing as pictos, but they don't give any stat boosts. Multiple characters can use the same lumina at once, and there are no limits to how many luminas a character can equip as long as you have enough lumina points. Each character also has a variety of unique weapons that has their own stats, elemental affinities, and passive abilities that can influence a character's playstyle. And each weapon provides attack power that increases your character's overall damage, which will scale based on specific character attributes. And when you level up, you will gain Lumina points, attribute points, and skill points that can all be used to make your party members stronger. And while exploring, you will run into expedition flags that will give you the option to fast travel within the area, learn new skills, upgrade attributes, and rest. Every single party member has their own separate skill tree to unlock more skills, and I'm happy to say that they don't feel overloaded or too ridiculous to deal with. And you can also take the time to upgrade your stats based on how you want to build your character. And even though every character is unique and have their own specialized gimmicks, this game is pretty flexible about how you can build your party members since there are so many options for abilities and they can pretty much fill any role you want them to fill. And if you don't like a specific build, you can always respec your characters for recodes, and you don't really have to worry about wasting them because this game is pretty generous and gives you more than enough recodes to use throughout your whole entire playthrough. And resting will restore your health and refill your items, but some of the enemies you've killed will instantly respawn, which is a system I like because it can make you think about when or where you should be resting without actually abusing it. And at some point you will gain access to the continent, which is basically the overworld that connects all of the main and optional locations, and as you keep progressing the story, you will gain the ability to destroy obstacles and travel the continent on the back of a future companion, which will make traversing the world feel a lot easier. And you can only pull up the map while navigating the continent, but I really wish this game had a mini-map, because having to constantly pause every time I want to look at the map to make sure I'm going in the right direction kinda gets annoying really fast and ruins the flow of the gameplay. And while this map is pretty big, it's not big to the point where it could start to make me feel overwhelmed, since the map is structured with a great sense of pacing and doesn't give me access to everything all at once. And this game does an amazing job of encouraging exploration because a lot of useful items are usually well hidden, so it makes me want to take the time and search for the area, which usually ends up being very rewarding. But sometimes you will run into platforming sections of the map that feels very clunky and awkward to go through, because once you jump from a high vantage point, you always have the chance to roll off the map, which can get really annoying. You can also find a few areas where you can play minigames, and while I feel like adding minigames is a great idea on paper, the minigames just felt lackluster, and I don't think I found a single minigame genuinely fun since they felt more frustrating than anything. You can also find special outfits and haircuts for your party members, and my favorite set of outfits were probably the super duper French looking ones. But while playing through the story, I was concerned about the costumes looking too goofy during a serious cutscene, but after looking through all of the settings, I learned that you can disable character customization during cutscenes, which is something I'm really happy about. There's also so many secrets you can find, like optional bosses, lost creatures, music records, and finding expedition journals. And I really love collecting journal entries because they can tell you a story about what they experienced on their expedition before they passed on, which is always very interesting because it can tell you a lot about the world's history. You can also buy a lot of useful items from merchants in almost every single area, but something I found really funny is that you can actually challenge these merchants to a fight so you can unlock more items to buy. But while these merchants are useful, there is no good way to find them while backtracking through an area, since it doesn't have a map or any sort of markers to track them, and I also wish you can buy multiple items at once instead of just one at a time. And at a certain point, you gain access to a camp where you can upgrade your weapons, luminas, tints, update your journal, listen to music records, and interact with your party members so you can raise your relationship with them. And something that really surprised me is that you can actually romance some of these characters in the game, which is a fine feature to add, but it feels so unnecessary since the romance doesn't really lead anywhere or add anything to the story, and I almost feel like they just added it for the sake of adding it without having any real thought behind it. But besides the main story, there's still a bunch of optional missions you can do, but I don't understand why they never added some sort of quest list to keep track of all of your missions, because I would have to constantly make a mental note to come back to an area in order to complete a side mission. And when you finally reach the end of the game, there is so much to do since you have full access to explore the whole entire map, and I really enjoyed how the story ended because it felt so emotional and meaningful to the point where it left a lasting impression on me. It's one of those endings where you have to take a second to process everything that just happened because of how thought-provoking it is, and I really love that it sparked a lot of conversations within the community. But Expedition 33 is one of those games where I wish I could erase my mind to experience everything again for the first time. I'm really gonna miss that feeling of gradually learning about the world, getting to know all of the characters, and being surprised by all of the big reveals. I got really invested with the storytelling because it was constructed with a sense of mystery, high stakes, and it provides a meaningful message that can be connected to real-life scenarios. And this story was so good to the point where I would easily consider this story one of the best pieces of written media I have ever experienced. And this game is really beautiful from an artistic standpoint because they really understand how to drive your emotions with well-directed cutscenes, passionate voice acting, and music that really pulls you into the moment. And I really enjoyed my time with the gameplay since it features reactive combat while also providing a world that feels meaningful to explore. And even though I mentioned that I don't like certain aspects of the game or maybe certain things could have been added or handled differently, a lot of those things were just minor inconveniences that could be easily ignored. I still had an amazing experience and I would still consider this one of my favorite video games of all time. It wasn't afraid to go beyond the boundaries of what a standard RPG looks like, and it gave me an experience I would never forget. And I know we have a long ways to go until the Game Awards actually happen, but not only do I think this game will be a strong Game of the Year contender, but I feel like this game deserves to win Game of the Year. But what do you guys think? Do you feel like Expedition 33 might be Game of the Year, or do you have another game on your radar that you personally think will be Game of the Year? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video.